Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. As the midterms come into view, particularly after last night's contests in a number of states, basically every major problem in this country that Donald Trump caused remains unresolved. I mean, just today, they're fighting to make it so they don't have to give back the tariff money, right? Remember the tariffs? Thought we were over that? No. Meanwhile, the war in Iran is ongoing, and despite claims of a so-called ceasefire, there are strikes basically every day. There's lots of firing happening between the two parties. The Strait of Hormuz, of course, remains under Iranian control. As a result, gas prices remain high, about 50% over where they were when we started this, and a real risk in the next few weeks they could spike up even higher. We're going to talk about that later in the program. And of course, amidst all this, what's so striking, what's so consistent is that the president just couldn't care less. I mean, truly could not possibly be less interested in doing anything about the larger issue of affordability or improving people's lives. And all of that continues to erode his popular support to new levels. Look at this chart from YouGov. I know there's a lot going on there, but stay with me. It's a pretty clear story. The pink line, that's the one that goes longer, right? That's tracking Trump's approval during his first term. The dark red line, shooting basically straight down like a roller coaster, is Trump's approval in his second term. Now, you can see he actually started more popular in this term than in the first one. And you can also see that he is much less popular now than he was at this point before the 2018 midterms. I mean, that's actually quite a gap. About 15 points less popular. And the trend is moving in the wrong direction for the president. Again, because all these crises remain unresolved, because he has either caused or exacerbated all of them, because he doesn't care about resolving them, it's continuing to shoot straight down. And that's why Republicans are so spooked about the upcoming midterms. It's why billionaires are going to spend hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to try to boost Republican fortunes, right? And you can see the Republicans' fear in how they're acting now in Congress. And there's this weird thing going on, particularly on display today. We have talked about the strange paradox that we're seeing, where Donald Trump's revenge tour against Republicans he thinks aren't loyal enough, his desire to retain the strongest possible grip over the party, is actually making him politically weaker more broadly. Let me explain, right? Trump has a strong grip on Republican primary voters. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Although we should note his preferred candidate did lose the gubernatorial primary in Iowa last night, somewhat surprisingly. So maybe that's slipping a bit. But more broadly, right, he's basically been running the table. For instance, he was able to unseat Senators John Cornyn of Texas and Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. That's two incumbent Republican senators, longstanding, as well as Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky. Basically forced out Senator Thom Tillis in North Carolina, forced him into early retirement, because he certainly would have lost a primary challenge to a Trump-backed opponent. But here's the thing. All those guys are still in Congress. And not just for, a few days. They're still in Congress until next January 2027. They don't disappear or get raptured when they lose their primaries or they announce their retirement. They stick around. They still have jobs. They still have votes. And somewhat understandably, they seem pretty pissed at Donald Trump. And despite being deeply conservative politicians, in fact, zealously fervent, even rabidly so in the case of Thomas Massie, I don't think any one of them is particularly eager to help Donald Trump in his congressional projects. Especially comes to the most egregious parts of Trump's current agenda. For instance, right, the slush fund for insurrectionists that the acting attorney general now claims, after some pressure, is dead, although who knows. Both Senators Cassidy and Tillis have been pretty outspoken against it, with the latter using a particularly novel turn of phrase to describe it.
Do you believe this is legal, what the president is trying to do, what the Department of Justice is trying to do?
I'm not going to be an attorney and judge its legality, but I think it's stupid on stilts.
Stupid on stilts, says Thom Tillis. And now, after losing his own primary last week, John Cornyn has, get what? Conveniently found his own conscience. Oh, there it is. I found it after I lost my primary. Quoting from an op-ed from the Wall Street Journal editorial board encouraging Congress to affirmatively vote down such a proposal, to block money for any such fund. The way to ensure the fund is more than mostly dead would be for Congress to put a stake through it. A, that's true. B, huzzah. C, John Cornyn posting that. Now, of course, Trump being Trump, as soon as he apparently directed his henchman, Todd Blanche, right, to kill it and back away from the slush fund, he brought forth another equally ridiculous proposal. So outrageous and corrupt and audacious that it's in the same category as a slush fund, because he wants Bill Pulte, his mortgage fraud attack dog, in charge of national intelligence, the head of all 18 intelligence agencies. Now, the guy is completely unqualified. There's every reason to believe that the only qualification he has in Trump's eyes is his willingness to abuse his office and to use it to persecute and spy on Trump's domestic political critics. That really is the track record that Bill Pulte has, right? So now Trump's spurned senators aren't afraid to call it out anymore.
Nothing that I hear suggests that he's competent for the job for which he's been appointed. And I say that because that's just kind of the kind of conversation among my colleagues, like, OMG. And so I just don't know the guy. But as one person said, he has no military background, no intelligence background. He's going to already keep his other job. And he's not even sure he has a security clearance.
I don't believe he's ever had a security clearance. He clearly has no experience in intelligence. He has no geopolitical experience, no international connections, the sorts of things you would look for. He's a far cry from Dan Coats, but he's got a structural problem. He simply doesn't have 51 votes on the Senate floor, and he may not even have the votes in Intel Committee, and we just need to tell the president that clearly. Now, we'll also tell you, whoever told the president to go ahead and commit to this publicly before vetting it should lose their jobs, because they should know that the math just works against Pulte being confirmed.
Do you see what Tillis always does? That's like the president is being ill-served by his advisors. Like it's the advisors' problem. It's whoever told the president. It's not the president's fault. But Tillis didn't stop there. In a committee hearing with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he also made perfectly clear where he stands.
Did you actually tell Pulte you were going to punch him in the face?
No, sir. I actually said I was going to kick his ass.
Good. Okay, good. I share the emotion.
Well, he's not alone. Seems likely there could be further no votes from senators like Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine, who, of course, is up for re-election. And, you know, when re-election comes around, she loves to show how independent she is from her Republican colleagues. And then you've got Republican Senate Leader John Thune, who conceded that Pulte would face an uphill battle for confirmation. No kidding. On the one hand, it should not take the end of their political careers to inspire people like Bill Cassidy or John Cornyn to speak out. Right? I mean, you should just call him like you see him, particularly when the president does something egregious. They should do it from the beginning. In fact, they probably shouldn't have voted for Pete Hegseth, to name one example. On the other hand, it is somewhat satisfying to see Trump stymied by a problem of his own making, which this surely is. Today, the Senate bucked him again by removing the funding for his precious, precious ballroom from the spending bill. We know he's pretty angry about that. It's all he cares about. Well, that's not true. Also the reflecting pool. He might even veto the Republicans' own party line bill they're trying to ram through reconciliation to shove more money at ICE and CBP as a result of it not having his precious ballroom funding. It's entirely possible basically all of his agenda, such as it is, could be dead on arrival for the rest of this Congress. And then assuming Democrats can flip the House in November, his legislative agenda could be dead on arrival for the remainder of his presidency. Now, I will say he doesn't seem to care much because he doesn't like the legislative branch. He doesn't think it should exist. He wants to be a king. But he squandered a year of a political trifecta because his need for petty revenge outweighed everything else. And the tighter he grips the party, the more it slips through his fingers and the more powerful the backlash. The more people he purges, the more he creates the conditions for people to break free.